What does it really mean when a woman chooses to live alone, not because society forces her to, but because she chooses to connect deeply with herself? In a world that still often measures a woman's worth by her relationships, why are more women opting for solitude? And what if this path isn't about rejecting love, but about reclaiming something far more profound? In recent years, there has been a significant shift. More women than ever are choosing to live alone not as a temporary pause, but as a deliberate act of self-discovery. Society has often painted them as lonely, rebellious, or even incomplete. But Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, saw something deeper. He recognized this solitude not as a rejection of the world, but as a crucible for transformation, a confrontation with the inner masculine or animus, and the journey toward individuation. Individuation for Jung is the process of becoming whole, an essential journey that happens whether or not we are in a relationship. A woman who lives alone isn't just seeking isolation, she is allowing herself to transform, to integrate her inner strengths, and to reclaim her own voice. For centuries, women were defined by their roles as wives, mothers, and caretakers. Their value was often tied to how well they nurtured and sustained the family unit. Independence was not just discouraged, it was feared. A woman alone was seen as incomplete, even suspicious. Yet today something has changed. More women are stepping off the traditional path, not out of bitterness or rejection of others, but because they have come to realize something crucial. Fulfillment does not have to come from someone else. This shift is not only social, it's psychological and archetypal. Jung would argue that a woman choosing solitude is not rejecting men, but rather confronting her animus, the unconscious masculine energy within her. When a woman depends solely on a man for security or validation, her animus remains dormant, but in solitude she awakens it. She becomes more decisive, self-reliant, and authoritative. This is a critical distinction. It's not about needing a partner, but about integrating the masculine aspects of herself. This integration, however, is not always smooth. Society still whispers that a woman alone is incomplete. It insists that her independence is just a phase. But Jung's framework tells us the opposite. A woman who consciously engages with her animus is stepping into a more authentic version of herself. She no longer seeks a man to fill a void. She finds power and wholeness within herself. The question then is not why she's alone, but what she's becoming. Solitude becomes the alchemical container for her transformation. In the absence of others to define her, she faces the fundamental question, who am I when no one else is watching? It is here that her journey truly begins. But this path is fraught with challenges. Jung warned that solitude can be a double-edged sword. It can foster self-discovery, or it can serve as a retreat from human connection, reinforcing walls that prevent real growth. The key difference lies in choice. A woman who isolates herself out of fear or unresolved trauma may stagnate, but one who chooses solitude consciously opens herself up to deep personal empowerment. In this process, shadow work becomes unavoidable. Jung's concept of the shadow refers to the parts of ourselves that we reject or hide, usually because they contradict our self-image or society's expectations. For a woman living alone, the shadow may manifest as a fear of loneliness, societal judgments, or even an over-identification with her independence. Yet it is precisely in facing these shadows that the greatest growth occurs. By acknowledging her fears without letting them control her, she reclaims her power. She learns to stop internalizing societal judgments and begins to define her worth on her own terms. In balancing her independence with openness, she avoids using solitude as a shield against vulnerability. Instead, she finds a more profound connection with herself and the world around her. Jung's teachings suggest that true wholeness comes not from rejecting any part of ourselves, but from integrating all parts, light and dark, masculine and feminine, strength and vulnerability. A woman who lives alone is not running from her shadows, she's embracing them. Her solitude becomes not a rejection of connection, but a journey toward deeper self-knowledge and authenticity. What is often misunderstood about women who choose to live alone is the assumption that they are lonely, and in truth, solitude and loneliness are not the same. Loneliness arises from a sense of disconnection, while solitude is a deliberate space for connection with oneself. A woman who embraces solitude is not lacking connection, she is redefining it on her own terms. Another common misconception is that a woman living alone is rejecting her femininity. Yet Jung's work dismantles this idea entirely. True femininity, according to Jung, is not about external roles or relationships. It's an inner force, a way of being that encompasses receptivity, intuition, creativity, and strength. A woman alone is not denying her femininity. She's deepening it, free from the expectations that once confined her. But despite these truths, societal pressures persist. Relatives might ask, when will you settle down? As though a woman's life only begins with partnership. These judgments, often steeped in pity, reflect a misunderstanding of the woman's true journey. For many, solitude is not a flaw, it's a strength, a conscious choice to grow and become. The key difference between healthy solitude and isolation is choice. Healthy solitude is dynamic, conscious engagement with oneself and the world. Isolation, however, is often a retreat from life, a defensive posture against unresolved pain. Jung emphasized that the goal of psychological growth is not to escape human connection, but to engage with it from a place of wholeness. A woman who isolates herself may be avoiding her shadows, but a woman who chooses solitude is confronting them head-on. This journey is not without its myths, but it's one that leads to profound self-realization. Solitude, in Jungian terms, is a sacred path, a space where the deepest wisdom of the feminine can be heard. From historical figures like Artemis, who rejected marriage to roam the wilderness, to Virginia Woolf, who articulated the psychological necessity of space for creativity, women throughout history have used solitude not as deprivation, but as a space for self-empowerment and wisdom. The modern woman walking this path joins a long tradition of women who transformed solitude into sovereignty. Through their stories, Jung's work resonates. Some truths can only be found alone. The woman who dares to be alone often discovers she was never truly solitary, but in deep communion with her whole self. In conclusion, the journey of solitude is not about rejecting men or relationships. It's about embracing the fullness of who a woman is. It's a journey toward becoming whole, independent of external validation, and in deep connection with her truest self.